Hello YouTube, it's been a while since we last met. Welcome back to Rapidnurse. Who am I? Just a nurse with years of nursing experience making me a nurse of all trades, but a master of nothing. These rapid experiences in the healthcare field took a fresh-faced young nurse with boundless hopes for our healthcare and warped it into a tired old nurse with a jaded sense of humor. On the channel, we will discuss topics that affect our healthcare. Did you know that the so-called humane executions we see in the justice system aren't as painless as we've been led to believe? Let's dive into one of the most controversial topics around executions. We're talking about the justice system's most extreme punishment, death. But do you know how these executions go down? Lethal injections, electrocutions, firing squads. Each one has a process, a purpose, and a story. Some people say it's justice served, while others call it state-sanctioned murder. But what happens when someone is executed? Let's break down the brutal reality. Whether you agree with it or not, the death penalty has been part of our justice system for centuries. It's meant to serve as the ultimate punishment for the worst of the worst. But what we don't talk about nearly enough is how these executions take place. Most of us have heard about lethal injections, but do we know what's inside that needle? What about the electric chair or the firing squad? Are these methods still being used today? And more importantly, are they as humane as we're led to believe? Today, we're going to look at the different forms of execution still being used in the justice system today. We'll break down the process of each, look at the cold, hard stats, and explore whether these methods are truly as humane as advertised. Let's start with the most commonly used method of execution in the United States, lethal injection. This method is often described as painless and humane, but is that true? Lethal injection involves a cocktail of 3 drugs. First, there's sodium thiopental or pentobarbital, a powerful anesthetic that's supposed to render the person unconscious. Second, pancuronium bromide paralyzes the muscles. And third, potassium chloride stops the heart. The idea is that the person slips into unconsciousness, their muscles freeze, and their heart gives out. No suffering, right? Well, not exactly. According to research from Amnesty International, lethal injections have gone wrong in more than 7% of cases in the US. That's 1 in every 14 executions. Some prisoners have been left conscious but paralyzed, essentially suffocating to death without the ability to cry out. Doesn't sound very humane anymore, does it? A 2014 botched execution in Oklahoma involved a man named Clayton Lockett, who suffered for 43 minutes after the drugs failed to work as planned. He writhed, groaned, and eventually died of a heart attack. Hardly the painless death we're told to expect. And the issue with lethal injection doesn't stop there. Many states have struggled to obtain the drugs used in the formula, largely because pharmaceutical companies, many of them European, refuse to sell these medications for executions. This has led to botched attempts where states had to scramble for alternatives, often with disastrous results. For instance, in 2018, the state of Nebraska used a never-before-tried combination of drugs on Kerry Dean Moore, which raised serious concerns about whether his death violated the 8th Amendment's protection against cruel and unusual punishment. This cocktail included a synthetic opioid fentanyl, which had never been tested in such a scenario before. Are we really okay with experimenting on human beings when lives are on the line? And here's another disturbing fact. There's often a lack of medical professionals overseeing these executions. Why? Because most doctors refuse to participate due to ethical reasons, leaving the job to untrained personnel who are more likely to make mistakes. Imagine a botched procedure like this happening in a hospital setting. There'd be outrage, lawsuits, and firings. But in the case of lethal injections, it's just another day at work for the justice system. To top it off, a 2020 study published in The Lancet found that up to 88% of inmates executed by lethal injection might have suffered from pulmonary edema, a condition where fluid fills the lungs, essentially causing them to drown internally before their heart finally gives out. So, while their bodies may appear still, their final moments could be filled with unspeakable agony. The image of a humane and painless death quickly fades when you realize how often this method falls short of those promises. But lethal injection is just the tip of the iceberg. Next up, let's talk about the electric chair, which has been around since the late 1800s. This method involves strapping the prisoner into a wooden chair, attaching electrodes to their head and leg, and then sending thousands of volts of electricity through their body. The idea here is to fry the brain and stop the heart. The voltage is usually around 2000 volts, and the person can lose consciousness within seconds. But, and here's the big but, there are plenty of cases where this process goes wrong. One famous botched execution involved Willie Francis, a 17-year-old who survived an initial electric chair execution in 1946 due to faulty equipment. He screamed, "Take it off! Let me breathe!" as the electricity surged through him, but failed to kill him. He was later executed again, making him a tragic symbol of how unreliable this method can be. The electric chair is still legal in some states, but only as a secondary method if lethal injection is unavailable. Even so, with the gruesome aftermath of charring flesh and smoke rising from the body, it's hard to argue that this method is anything but medieval. The electric chair is notorious for its brutal aftermath. In many cases, witnesses have reported seeing flames shoot from the prisoner's head, their body convulsing uncontrollably, and the stench of burning flesh filling the room. A 2005 study from the Journal of Forensic Science found that around 3% of electric chair executions between 1890 and 1970 were botched, leading to drawn-out and agonizing deaths. In modern times, the electric chair has been largely phased out, but it's still legal in at least 8 US states, including Alabama, Florida, and South Carolina. Some states even give prisoners the option to choose between lethal injection or electrocution, an absurd choice if you think about it. It's like asking someone to pick their method of torture. The potential for things to go wrong remains high. In 1999, Alan Lee Davis, convicted of murder, was executed by electric chair in Florida. After the first jolt of electricity, his nose started bleeding profusely, and witnesses saw his chest heave as if he were still alive. His face turned purple and swollen, and his body remained in that grotesque state as the voltage continued to surge through him. It was so disturbing that the Florida Supreme Court reviewed the execution photos and, shockingly, ruled it was not cruel and unusual punishment. According to the Death Penalty Information Center, around 158 people have been executed by electric chair since the 1970s. While the number is small compared to lethal injections, the horror of those deaths cannot be overlooked. But let's be real, whether it's more reliable or not, the electric chair is far from humane. When you think of firing squads, it probably conjures up images of old war movies or frontier justice in the Wild West. But firing squads are still legal in a few US states, including Utah and South Carolina. Utah carried out a firing squad execution as recently as 2010. This isn't some relic of the past. It's a very real, albeit rare, option for capital punishment today. So how does it work? The prisoner is strapped to a chair, sometimes blindfolded, and 5 marksmen take aim at the heart. Interestingly, only 4 shooters have live rounds, while 1 rifle is loaded with a blank, so none of them knows for sure who fired the fatal shot. This is supposed to alleviate the psychological burden of pulling the trigger, but does it make the process any more humane? Some experts argue that firing squads are more humane than lethal injections or electrocutions. Why? Because death is typically quick and caused by massive blood loss or immediate damage to vital organs. In the 2010 execution of Ronnie Lee Gardner in Utah, medical experts confirmed that he likely lost consciousness within seconds after being shot. In comparison to lethal injections, which can take minutes and sometimes even hours, when botched, the firing squad seems almost merciful in its speed. But is it truly humane to line someone up and shoot them? The American Civil Liberties Union, ACLU, states that while firing squads have a lower error rate compared to other methods, the optics are disturbing. The sight of a person bound to a chair, blindfolded, and shot to death feels shockingly archaic in the 21st century. Still, some argue it's a cleaner, more straightforward method than lethal injection, which has a botch rate of around 7%. To put it in perspective, firing squads have a very low error rate. According to a Death Penalty Information Center report, out of the 34 executions by firing squad in the US since 1900, there have been no documented cases of a botched execution. Compare that with the string of mishandled lethal injections and electric chair incidents, and you start to see why some people, including death row inmates themselves, have opted for this method. But here's the real ethical dilemma. While it may be quick and effective, it's also brutal, bringing up dark imagery that seems out of place in today's world. Should the state be in the business of lining people up and executing them with a barrage of bullets, no matter how efficient it might seem? Before we finish up the video, please take a moment to hear from our friends and affiliate Fiverr. I've been searching for a way to boost my YouTube presence, and I think I found the perfect solution. Fiverr, it's my one-stop shop for all my freelance needs. Tired of juggling multiple freelancers and sites? Want to streamline your business and save time? Fiverr is the answer. I've already hired a graphic designer to create a new logo and a social media manager to handle my content. And guess what? I found them all on Fiverr. With Fiverr's vast network of talented freelancers, you can find the perfect match for any project, big or small. The platform is so easy to use. I simply posted my project, set my budget, and received dozens of proposals within hours. It's incredible! Here at Rapidnurse, we work with the talented freelancers of Fiverr to create this very YouTube video you are watching. Join the millions of satisfied customers like Rapidnurse who have discovered the power of Fiverr. Start your next project today and see the difference by clicking on the link below to help the Rapidnurse channel. So, what are you waiting for? Visit Fiverr today and start collaborating with amazing freelancers from around the world. Fiverr, your freelance marketplace, your business success. Now, let's dive into one of the most infamous and controversial methods of execution, the gas chamber. First introduced in the early 20th century as a modern alternative to hanging or the electric chair, it was once touted as a more humane form of capital punishment. The process involves sealing the condemned in an airtight chamber and releasing hydrogen cyanide gas, which is supposed to cause unconsciousness and death within minutes. Sounds clinical, right? But the reality is far more disturbing. In theory, the prisoner should lose consciousness quickly, but that's not always the case. Let's take the 1999 execution of Walter Legrand in Arizona as a prime example. Legrand's death turned into a gruesome spectacle, lasting a torturous 18 minutes. Witnesses reported that he gasped for air, convulsed, and writhed in pain as the cyanide gas slowly suffocated him. The agony and helplessness of suffocating to death by poison gas is something out of a nightmare, and it's not far off from images of chemical warfare. And that's what makes the gas chamber so particularly chilling. It draws inevitable comparisons to weapons of mass destruction. Cyanide gas was infamously used during the Holocaust and in chemical warfare, making the idea of employing it in state executions feel grotesque and inhumane. The use of gas chambers has dwindled over the years, with only a handful of states like Arizona, California, and Wyoming still keeping it on the books as a backup method. Even though most states have abandoned it in favor of lethal injection, the fact that it remains an option is baffling, especially considering its dark and gruesome history. According to Amnesty International, there have been 11 gas chamber executions in the US since 1976, and each has raised serious ethical and humanitarian concerns. The visual horror of someone gasping for air, coupled with the fact that executions can take anywhere from 10 to 20 minutes, makes it hard to believe that anyone could seriously argue that the gas chamber is humane. In short, it's hard to view the gas chamber as anything but a relic of a darker time in human history, one that has no place in modern-day justice systems. Though hanging may seem like a relic from a bygone era, something we associate with Wild West outlaws or historical executions, it is still used today in a few parts of the world. Surprisingly, it remains legal in 2 US states, New Hampshire and Washington, although it's rarely chosen. Hanging is intended to be a quick and efficient method of execution. The goal is to calculate the drop perfectly so that the person's neck snaps instantly, causing immediate unconsciousness and death. But here's the problem. Precision is everything, and when it goes wrong, it can go wrong. If the drop is too short, instead of a quick death, the condemned person can be left to slowly strangle. Death by asphyxiation could take several agonizing minutes. On the other hand, if the drop is too long, decapitation becomes a very real and terrifying possibility. It's a method that walks a thin line between brutal and efficient, but mistakes have been made throughout history, proving how dangerous and unreliable hanging can be. One particularly gruesome case is that of George Painter, who was executed by hanging in the early 1900s. The calculations for the drop were off, and the rope was too long, leading to a grisly decapitation. The idea of a state-sanctioned decapitation, even if unintentional, makes it clear why hanging is so controversial and why it's rarely used in modern times. In terms of numbers, the last hanging in the United States occurred in 1996 in Delaware, when convicted murderer Billy Bailey chose it over lethal injection. While it is rarely carried out today, the mere fact that it's still an option in the US should make anyone question how modern and advanced our justice system truly is. According to the Death Penalty Information Center, hanging has accounted for only 3 executions in the US since 1976, but it remains on the books as a backup option in extreme cases where lethal injection is either unavailable or unconstitutional. Globally, countries like Iran still use hanging frequently, with Iran being responsible for over 50% of the world's hangings as of 2022, according to Amnesty International's annual report on capital punishment. Given its potential for error and the brutal nature of botched executions, it's easy to see why hanging has largely fallen out of favor. But the fact that it remains an option in some states raises questions about whether any method of execution can truly be considered humane. So, after hearing about all these methods, lethal injection, the electric chair, firing squads, the gas chamber, and even hanging, what do you think? Leave a comment below. Can any form of execution be considered humane? It's a heavy topic, and there's no easy answer. But one thing is clear. Every method has its flaws, and none of them offer a perfect, painless solution. Do you think the death penalty should even exist, given all these complications? Let us know in the comments below. If you found this video interesting, don't forget to give it a thumbs up, subscribe to our channel for more thought-provoking content, and hit that notification bell so you never miss an update. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video. I find it interesting as time goes on, and as healthcare rapidly changes in 2025, you took the time to view the video. You have my sincere gratitude, thank you. Before I sign out, could I ask you to please like, comment, turn on notifications, and subscribe to Rapidnurse. This will really help the channel get out of the intensive care unit and back out on the floor with more great video content from Rapidnurse.